I told myself it was a mistake, the way I looked at her that day. But now, months later, I still remember the exact way the air felt, thick with engine oil and the sound of rain ticking against the metal roof of the workshop. It was late. Everyone else had gone home except me, trying to finish a brake job for a customer who'd been patient enough to wait. That customer turned out to be her. She stepped inside just as I wiped my hands on a rag, the kind of entrance that made the whole space feel smaller. She wasn't dressed like most people who came in here. A soft gray sweater, a thin silver chain, no makeup that I could tell. Her eyes, tired, maybe, but not weak. They had that look of someone who'd been through too much to be easily impressed. "You're still open?" she asked, her voice calm low. The kind of voice you have to lean in to hear properly. "Technically closed," I said, shrugging. "But I'm still here, so lucky timing." She smiled, not the polite kind. More like a reflex she wasn't expecting to have. Her car, a dark blue sedan, was idling outside, wipers dragging across the glass. She said it made a noise when turning left. I said I'd take a look. And that's when it started, that strange silence that doesn't feel empty. I crouched near the wheel while she waited just a few feet away, arms crossed, rain dripping from her hair onto her sweater. I remember thinking her perfume didn't match the place. It was soft, like clean sheets after a long day. It made the smell of oil and rust almost disappear. "You don't look old enough to run this place," she said suddenly. "I don't," I replied. "Just trying to keep it from falling apart." She nodded, watching me work. There was something steady about her presence, like she wasn't just there, she was seeing. Every movement, every word. When I stood up again, our eyes caught for a moment too long. Not romantic, just human. A flicker of something unnamed. I looked away first. "Should be safe to drive for now," I said, tightening the last bolt. "But if it starts again, bring it back. I'll check it properly." "I'll hold you to that," she said. Her tone was light, but there was a small hitch at the end, like she wanted to say something else and didn't. That pause stayed with me. It still does. She paid in cash, her fingers brushing mine when she handed over the notes. Cold skin, faint tremor. I told myself it was just the weather, but something in her eyes said otherwise, that she'd been cold for a while, and not because of the rain. When she left, I caught my reflection in the glass door, still holding the receipt, still standing there like she might come back. I laughed at myself, turned off the lights, and went home. But later that night, I found myself replaying the sound of her voice, the quiet certainty of it. I couldn't explain why it felt like I'd stepped into someone else's story. It was just a repair job, just a woman passing through. Just a mistake, I told myself. But every time I thought about how she'd said, "I'll hold you to that," I heard something beneath it, a kind of loneliness that matched mine. And maybe that's where it started, in that rain-soaked silence between her question and my answer, when neither of us realized how close we already were to calling it something we couldn't take back. She came back 3 days later, said the noise had returned. It was Saturday morning, the kind where the sunlight cuts through the dust and makes everything look older than it is. I'd been half hoping she would, though I didn't let myself think about why. This time, she didn't stay outside. She stepped right in, set her keys on the counter, and leaned there like someone who'd already decided not to be in a hurry. "Thought I told you I'd fix it if it acted up again," I said, trying to sound casual. "You did," she said. "I wasn't sure you meant it." There was a tiny, tired smile, the kind that hides more than it shows. She sat in the waiting area while I pulled her car in. Through the glass, I could see her, fingers wrapped around a paper cup from the vending machine, thumb circling the rim. Not drinking, just holding. I took longer than I needed to. Maybe because the quiet felt safer when I could pretend it was just about the car. When I finally came out, she was staring at the rain-streaked window. The day had gone gray again, the kind of weather that made you want to stay anywhere that wasn't home. "It's the steering rack," I said. "I can order the part, but it'll take a few days." She nodded slowly. "That's fine. I can wait." She said it like waiting was something she'd done her whole life. I told her she could leave the car here, that I'd drive her home if she wanted. For a second, she hesitated, the kind of pause that makes time stretch. Then she said, "You don't have to do that." "I know," I said, "but it's raining again." She studied me, eyes narrowing slightly, not suspicious, just measuring. And then she nodded. The drive was quiet. She gave directions in short phrases, nothing more than necessary. I noticed her hands again. Pale, small scars along one finger, nails cut short. When she folded them in her lap, I realized I was gripping the wheel too tightly. "Do you always help your customers like this?" she asked softly. "Only the interesting ones." That made her laugh. Short, unsteady, but real. She shook her head, looking out the window. "Don't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because you sound like you mean them." She said it quietly, not unkindly, more like she was warning herself than me. When we reached her place, she thanked me but didn't open the door right away. Instead, she looked straight ahead, hands still clasped. Her voice was almost a whisper. "It's strange," she said. "You remind me of never mind." "What?" She shook her head. "Forget it." I wanted to ask again, but something about the moment felt fragile, like touching it would break it. So I just said, "I'll let you know when the part comes in." She finally met my eyes then, and for a heartbeat, she didn't look guarded. Just tired. Beautifully, achingly tired. When she got out, I waited until she closed the door behind her before driving away. But in the rearview mirror, I caught one last glimpse, her standing in the rain, watching me leave. And that's when I realized, it wasn't just her car I wanted to fix anymore. It was something else, something I had no business touching. By the time her car part arrived, the weather had turned rough again. Sky the color of wet cement, thunder pacing the edge of town like something restless. She came in after closing, said she didn't want to bother me during work hours. I told her it was fine, though my voice came out quieter than I meant. The shop lights hummed above us, a thin, tired sound. She stood by the workbench while I finished tightening the bolts on the steering rack. Every few minutes, I caught her watching me, not in that way people do when they're waiting, but like she was trying to remember something. "You do this alone?" she asked. "Most days." "That must get lonely." I looked up at her, but she was already pretending to read something off the wall, safety guidelines printed years ago. There was a long pause. Then she said, almost under her breath, "You remind me of someone I used to know." He never said much either. "What happened to him?" I asked. She smiled, small and sad. "He left before I realized I should have asked him to stay." The rain outside hit harder. The lights flickered once. She stepped closer without meaning to, drawn by the noise maybe, or something quieter between us. I could smell the rain on her coat, the faint trace of her perfume, something clean, unassuming. "I can drop you home again," I said, breaking the silence. "Are you sure you want to?" I wouldn't have offered if I didn't. That earned a look, one that stayed too long. We drove through the rain, wipers scraping rhythmically. She fiddled with the radio, found nothing worth listening to, and turned it off. The silence that followed wasn't awkward this time, just full. When we reached her place, she didn't get out right away. "Come in for a minute," she said, voice soft but steady. "It's pouring." Her living room smelled faintly of coffee and something floral. She hung her coat by the door and disappeared into the kitchen. "I was going to make tea," she called out. "Still do." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. My hands wouldn't stay still. I kept adjusting things that didn't need adjusting. The cuff of my sleeve, the edge of the table. She brought 2 mugs, handed me one. Her fingers brushed mine again. Same static spark, same quiet jolt. "You don't talk much," she said. "But you look like you're always thinking something you shouldn't." I almost said it, that I think about her when I shouldn't, that every time she looks at me like that, I forget the space between our ages, our rules, our reasons. But before I could answer, her phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up, Mark calling. She froze, staring at it. Her hand trembled slightly before she flipped it face down. "Ex-husband," she said after a moment, voice thin. "He calls when he's drunk." She smiled again, brittle, unconvincing, and took a sip of tea that had already gone cold. Something in me wanted to reach across the space, steady her hand, tell her she didn't have to explain. But I didn't move. We sat there, the sound of rain pressing against the windows, her phone vibrating once more before falling silent. She exhaled softly, eyes closing for just a second. "You should go," she said finally. I stood, but neither of us moved toward the door. For one suspended breath, we were too close. Her warmth, her uncertainty, her silence. And if I'd leaned in just an inch more, just one, it wouldn't have been a mistake anymore. But I didn't. Not yet. She didn't come by for a week after that night. No calls, no texts. Just quiet. And in that quiet, I realized how much noise she'd left behind. The sound of her laugh, her uneven breathing when she tried not to cry, the way her words lingered after she left a room. When she finally did come back, It wasn't about the car. She just showed up. Late evening, the shop lights dimmed, the kind of hour when everything feels slightly unreal. You weren't answering, she said. I didn't know you were calling. She gave a half shrug, her expression unreadable. Maybe I didn't call loud enough. I didn't know what to say to that. She stood there for a moment, then sat on the edge of the workbench, her hands gripping the metal edge like she needed something solid to hold on to. You ever get tired of pretending? She asked. Pretending what? That you don't care when you actually do. The question landed hard. I didn't look at her, just stared at my hands, blackened from grease and time. You mean about people? About anything. There was a long silence after that. Only the hum of the fluorescent light, the faint smell of rain again. She looked around the shop like she was searching for something to make it easier to stay. I keep thinking, she said finally. If I were younger, or if you were older, she trailed off, almost laughing at herself. Doesn't matter. It wouldn't change what this is, would it? I looked up then, really looked at her. There was no pretending left. The tiredness was gone, replaced by something sharper, lonelier. I don't know what this is, I said. And maybe that's the problem. She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. No, that's the truth. The problem is that we both do. Her words stayed between us like heat. I took a step closer, slow, careful, the air shifting. You think this is a mistake? I think it already was, she said. Before it even started. Her voice was soft, but the tremor in it was real. She didn't move when I came closer, just looked up at me, eyes glassy in the low light. I don't want to ruin what's left of my life, she whispered. And I don't want to ruin yours either. There it was, the honesty we'd both been avoiding. Not the confession I'd imagined, but something truer. I never wanted to make things harder for you, I said quietly. You didn't, she replied. You just made them real again. For a long moment, neither of us breathed. The world outside could have disappeared, and I wouldn't have noticed. Then she stood, smoothing her jacket with trembling hands. We should stop seeing each other like this, she said, before it turns into something we can't name. I nodded, even though my chest ached at the words. She walked to the door, paused, and turned back, eyes soft, breaking. You make me feel seen, and that's the cruelest part. The door closed behind her, and the silence that followed said everything we couldn't. A month passed before I saw her again. Enough time to convince myself it had ended, whatever it was. Enough time for the silence to feel like punishment and relief at once. Then, one evening, I found a small envelope slipped under the workshop door. No name, no return address, just my name, written in handwriting I'd already memorized. Inside was a photo. Two people standing in front of an old house, a young man with grease-stained hands, and her, younger, but unmistakably her. On the back, in faded ink, it said, "Before everything broke." For a long while, I just stood there, the picture trembling slightly between my fingers. Later that night, she came by. She didn't say hello, just walked straight in, eyes fixed on the floor, as if she was still deciding whether to stay. You found it? She asked quietly. I nodded. He was the one you mentioned, the one who left? She smiled faintly, eyes unfocused. He didn't leave. He died. Car accident. 20 years ago. I didn't know what to say. The words felt too big for the room. He worked in a place like this, she went on. He was 23. You have his hands. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, and she turned away as if embarrassed. I could see her reflection in the dark window, the way her shoulders tensed, how she was holding her breath like it hurt to keep talking. I told myself I stopped coming here because of guilt, she said. But I think it was because, when I look at you, I see pieces of him. And I didn't know what that meant. Something in my chest shifted, not pity, not confusion, just a deep, heavy stillness. I'm not him, I said, though it came out softer than I meant. I know, she whispered. That's what makes it worse. The storm outside was starting again, soft thunder in the distance, the kind that rolls for miles. I wanted to reach for her, but I didn't. I couldn't. There was too much weight between us now, ghosts, years, what-ifs. She turned then, eyes glistening, expression almost apologetic. You didn't deserve to get pulled into this, she said. You were just kind, and I mistook that for something I could hold on to. I shook my head. You didn't mistake it. Her lips parted, like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. Instead, she stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her, the scent of her skin mixed with rain and memory. I shouldn't have given you that photo, she said quietly. But now you know why I couldn't stay away. She reached out then, barely touching my sleeve, her fingers trembling against the fabric. You remind me what it feels like to still be alive, she whispered. And just like that, with that one sentence, the ground shifted beneath us. It wasn't a confession. It was something deeper, something neither of us could name without breaking it. When she pulled back, she smiled the saddest smile I've ever seen. Now you understand why it has to end, she said. But the way she said it, it didn't sound like she believed it. I didn't expect to see her again after that night. But life has a way of circling back to what you try hardest to avoid. She showed up on a quiet Sunday. No rain this time. Just sunlight creeping through the high windows, dust floating like slow-moving snow. She looked different. Not better or worse, just lighter, somehow. Like she'd finally stopped fighting herself. I came to apologize, she said softly, standing at the doorway as if afraid to cross it. For what? For remembering you too much. I smiled, though it came out shaky. That doesn't sound like something to be sorry for. She stepped inside. It is when remembering starts to feel like wanting. The air between us thickened, but not with tension, more like a quiet understanding that words couldn't untangle. She moved closer, tracing her fingers along the counter, eyes drifting over the tools, the scattered bolts, the small world I'd built here. This place smells like him, she said. Grease, metal, coffee. But when you talk, it's nothing like him. You're gentler. I didn't answer. I just watched her hand move, slow and deliberate, like she was learning the world again through touch. You know, I said finally, I think we both came here looking for someone else, and somehow ended up finding ourselves instead. That made her laugh, a soft, unsteady laugh that turned into something almost like a sigh. Maybe that's what this was for. She sat on the low stool near the wall, where she'd waited the first time we met. I leaned against the workbench opposite her. Neither of us tried to fill the silence. It was the kind of silence that didn't need to be escaped. After a while, she said, Do you still think it was a mistake? I thought about it. About every near touch, every word left unsaid. No, I said quietly. Just something that couldn't last, but needed to happen anyway. She nodded. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, I saw peace in them. Not joy, just peace, the kind that comes after too many storms. We didn't move closer, but the space between us felt smaller. She reached out, slow, almost uncertain, and let her hand rest over mine. Not to hold, not to promise anything, just to acknowledge that we had both been changed by something neither of us planned. Her thumb brushed over my knuckles, once, then again. A quiet apology, a quiet thank you. I'll always be grateful, she said. Not for what almost happened, but for what you reminded me of. I looked at her, at the lines time had drawn across her face, at the strength in her eyes that still carried sadness like a shadow. I'll miss you, I said. She smiled, small and real. Then don't. Just remember me kindly. And that was it. No embrace. No kiss. Just her standing, brushing the dust from her sleeves, and walking out into the sunlight that had finally broken through the windows. When the door closed behind her, the silence that followed wasn't empty this time. It felt like something had finally settled, quietly, completely. The kind of ending that doesn't hurt anymore. It's been almost a year since I last saw her. Sometimes I still catch myself looking toward the doorway when the bell above it rings, like some part of me still expects her to walk in, hair damp from rain, eyes carrying that quiet kind of sadness only she wore so beautifully. But she doesn't. And that's okay now. The day she left, I thought I'd lost something. What I didn't realize was that she'd left me with something too, a silence that wasn't empty anymore, but full of meaning. I still have the photo she gave me. I keep it in the drawer by the register, not as a secret, but as a reminder. Sometimes, when I close the shop late, I take it out and look at it. Not because I miss her, but because I want to remember the woman who taught me that love isn't always about having. Sometimes it's about seeing, even for a moment, and letting that be enough. People talk about love like it's supposed to change your life. She didn't change mine. She changed me. She showed me that connection doesn't need a name or a future to matter. That two people can meet in the wrong season of their lives and still create something honest, something that lingers quietly, like the smell of rain after it's gone. There were nights I used to replay our conversations in my head, trying to figure out where it all turned, where the line blurred between curiosity and care. But I think the truth is simpler. There was never a line. There was only understanding, fragile, inconvenient, real. She once told me I reminded her what it felt like to be alive. What I couldn't tell her then was that she did the same for me. Now, when I see her car sometimes on the other side of town, passing without slowing, I don't ache the way I used to. I just smile a little, because we found something that didn't need to be claimed to be real. Love, I've learned, isn't always about staying. Sometimes it's about leaving gently, so the other person can breathe again. I used to call it a mistake. He called it the end. But now, I just call it ours. That fleeting, impossible space between what almost happened and what was always meant to. And if I'm honest, I wouldn't trade it for anything. He glances out the window, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, the kind you wear when you've finally forgiven yourself for feeling too much. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?